And here we are in Nevern, and this is the Pilgrim's Cross. Surprisingly, there's actually signposts, there are the path. It's easy to find, and you can see it right there. The story of Empress Helen going to Jerusalem and demanding to be given the cross on which Jesus was crucified is well known. What is much less well known, because it's just not taught in schools anymore, is that the Empress Helen was actually British. And she brought the cross back to Britain. More specifically, a place in West Wales called Nevern. Now, at one point, this was massively famous. It was thousands and thousands of pilgrims would come to this site to pray for a vision. Not just of any vision, they would pray for a vision of the true cross. Another part of Britain's hidden history, which really shouldn't be hidden, and we're going to look at where it was, how you can visit it, and the story behind it getting there. Right, now one of the sources we're going to look at for information here, The Holy Kingdom by Adrian Gilbert and Wilson and Blackett. And if you look at their chapter 9, The Cross of Christ, you'll see here, it says here, the Empress Helen is said to be born in circa 265, dying in 336 AD at the age of 71. She was a British queen and was the mother of Constantine the Great, who became ruler over the whole Roman Empire in 324. She became empress and for a long time ruled the empire in partnership with her son. Though it was he who made Christianity the official religion of the empire, there can be little doubt that he did so largely because of her influence. She was certainly a force to be reckoned with. Whilst his son was building his new imperial city of Constantinople, now called Istanbul, Empress Helen went on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and Sinai. Accompanied by a formidable bodyguard, she entered the holy city and demanded that its leaders hand over to her the true cross on which the Christ had been crucified. After an exchange of threats and excuses, 3 pieces of timber were eventually brought out for her inspection. She was told that one of them was the cross she was looking for, the other 2 being those of the thieves crucified either side of Jesus. Now the first reaction, of course, is that people are going to say, no, Helen was not British at all. She was some innkeeper's daughter from somewhere in Hungary, who Constantius, the father of Constantine, just bumped into and had a bit of a love affair with, and the reason for this seems to be it was a slur, a malicious slur that was created so that this marriage would be annulled and Constantius would then be free to make the political marriage with Theodora. The last thing they could have in the empire is a situation where Constantine is the legitimate ruler, although he's now moved back to Western Europe and he's going to go to Britain, and we'll come on to that later. But they have to promote the emperor of the time. Peter Enderby, in his ancient book Cambrian's Triumphants, makes the argument very well. Nicephorus and son later after him would have her, Helena, to be born in Bithynia at Drepanum, and the daughter of an innkeeper there, with whom Constantius, passing that way to the Persians, fell in love. But this is made impossible by that is said before of the both Constantius and Helena being in Britain, so remote from any part of Bithynia at that time, and neither of them coming to or near Drepanum or any part of Bithynia at or after this time. He goes on, others there be which do determine this renowned empress by the name Concubina, as Marianus and Florentius Vigorinicius, as they have been lately published, and Regino, without speaking anything of her parentage and country. And Martinus Polonus, who confesseth she was daughter to the King of Britain. This I have written here to answer these frivolous cavils against that blessed woman, and with John Capgrove call their allegations no better than dreams. And to speak still in his words, that opinion doth not only blemish the fame of so holy a woman, but maketh that most noble Constantine to be a bastard begot out of marriage, and so disableth him to have been heir of Constantius, either king or emperor, when all men know he came to the imperial dignity by right of inheritance. He goes on, it is a pagan report, and first raised by Zosimus, that most malicious ethnic, and railer against Constantine, for professing and advancing of Christian religion, and renouncing idolatry. And this is evident by the best learned authors themselves, which in any sense called Saint Helena by that name. For they do plainly confess, as namely Marianus, that Saint Helen was the true wife of Constantius, and he forced by Maximian the emperor to put her away and take Theodora, his wife's daughter. Now, there are other parts of the story regarding she sent the nails as bridal bits to her son Constantine. What we're going to do now is concentrate on the British records and what happened next in the story. Now, if you look in West Wales, well, in fact, all over Wales, there are ancient roads which are called the Sarn Helen, which is the causeway of Helen. Now, what seems to have happened is that Helen paraded the cross around the country on a grand tour before depositing it in its final resting place for safekeeping. It's a sort of pilgrim's way. And what we'll see later, and we're going to visit the site, and you'll see it, is that you also have these pilgrims' cross. And they also have other places called the Pass of the Cross, the Mountain of the Cross, the Valley of the Cross, the Ford of the Cross, the Vale of the Cross, the Fields of the Cross, and so on. And the final destination of the cross is recorded in the long lists drawn up for the wedding of Owen, the son of Hywel the Good, of David. And this is part of the Herleon 3859 collection of manuscripts. There's a really important piece of work here concerning Wales in the Dark Ages. So the king lists are also drawn up in the Black Book of Carmarthen. And from this then you can work out who the intermarried royal houses are and put together the relationships. Now, surprising as it may seem, it states very clearly that around, when this was written about 920, that the cross was in Dyfed in southwest Wales.
It's not quite as big as I thought, but it's good to get an idea.
Now, the place where all this comes to be is Nevern in Dyfed. Now, we look at the astrological side of it. It's fascinating. This forms Cygnus, the centre of the cross, and it's also very near to where Preseli Mountains, where the stones for Stonehenge would come from. So it's a very significant site that was chosen.
So this is a natural cliff. You can see the cross, okay? But if you look at the cross closely, this part, the top half, that's all part of the cliff. Alright? And the cliff goes to there. This is not part of the cliff. And a bit like when you seal a letter, you know, you write across the seal, so if someone rips it open, you can see your signature all messed up. You know, I'd sign my name half on the cliff and half on these infills. So if someone tried to take this out, you'd never get it back together exactly right.
The top, they tried to take something out of the top. It's in a square, it's a hollow. In the top.
Oh, maybe someone up there is trying to look in.
Yeah.
So the theory is, anyway, there's some sort of cave or something behind here, which is where the cross is held, the one that Helen brought back. There you go, so those are like stones and things. I should do a few more close-ups. And there's the actual cross itself.
Now, there seems to be an attempt to kind of overwrite or ignore this part of the history. Now, fortunately, when Wilson and Blackett came along in the 90s, they reported the significance of this, and they showed the cross, and how it is formed partly out of the cliff and partly out of the infill in the way it's been done. And the authorities have responded. There is now a national monument, ancient monument order on it, so it's now scheduled, so it cannot be disturbed or interfered with. But rather disappointingly, it's been relegated to a sort of some sort of stop-off point on the way to St. David's. Whereas if you look at the history of Nevern, and as we'll see, the other things that appear here, this place was massively more important. And it was a centre of Christianity for hundreds of years and a real pilgrim destination for hundreds of years until most recent times when it's kind of been forgotten about and written out of history. But at least it's got some sort of protection on it, or preservation, but also there's been absolutely no inquiry at all to actually try and let's find out what it's all about. The frustrating thing is, it really wouldn't be that difficult. I mean, Wilson and Blackett's investigations, they had a scanner and they found as a non-ferrous casket, which would fit in with the idea of Helen putting the bits of wood in a jewel-encrusted casket, you know, and all you have to do, you could carefully do this, take out some of the blocks, run some cameras in and see if there is another cavern inside. which is what the story says, and he'd go back into that, and it should be some sort of cave or crypt area where the relics would be found. So come on, let's pull your fingers out, authorities, let's go and have a proper look. This could be one of the biggest tourist attractions in the whole world. The true cross that Helen brought, for goodness sake. Yeah, you'll see our visit into the church in a minute, which is other place of interest. And there happened to be a group of Americans who come all the way over from Chicago, and he was a Welsh tourist guide showing them around. And because it was raining a bit, he wasn't even going to bother telling them about the cross. He hadn't even mentioned it to them. When I told them about this story and the Empress, they were so excited. It was quite funny, really, because they all went charging off out of the church, and there is a sign in the middle of Nevern telling you where to go to find these things. And I gave them a couple of directions. It says up there, it's only about, 50 yards or something. They all went, and the tour guide was left looking rather humble in the church with his group having deserted to go and see something which really could be a World Heritage Site. It's that significant. I can't get across enough how vital it is this site gets the respect it's due, and the exploration, and indeed some sort of protection or something as well. I don't know. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. I'm also quickly going to mention in passing that it is the site of Cygnus and the centre of the cross, which is also mapped out as a giant star map, which we'll come on to again.
Right. I thought this is just worth showing quickly. This is a wall to the bottom of someone's garden. I mean, there's the same cliff that the cross is in. Unfortunately, it's raining now, so you get an idea of the wall. It's not terribly difficult to make. This sort of stone naturally splits very thin. And it's quite hard. Not at all comfortable, is it, puppy? You look comfortable enough. It's raining, we're going, come on.
And by the way, if you ever come here, there's really good blackberries.
Yeah, come this time of year. If you're thirsty, just gulp down a few of these. Plenty here.
Get the soft ones, they're the sweetest.
All right. So here's the church, famous Nevern church.
Right, in Nevern itself, in the village, it's hardly any of it. So it's easy enough to find. The main building is the church. And as we're going into the churchyard, see, the big tree on the right, I want you to look at that quickly, because that is the scene of, it's not to do with the ancient history, but there's a legend that a man hanged himself on this tree, and in an attempt to wipe out the memory of the horrible event, the villagers cut off the branch from which he swung. This is from Adrian Gilbert's The Holy Kingdom book. The wound inflicted on the tree where the branch was cut has, however, never healed, and it's been bleeding ever since. People used to place handkerchiefs under it to catch the dripping sap, which would be clear at first, before staining the material a blood-red colour, giving the impression that the tree was bleeding. And I can tell you, we tried it, and it does. You can vouch for it. You get that stuff on your clothes, you get a red mark. It's amazing. Now, I know there's scientific explanations that it's too much iron oxide in the soil and stuff like that. But this has been going on for a long, long time, and no one can find any other trees where it happens. And it's another one of those fantastic little stories which people should be promoting and generating interest, because Nevern is absolutely fantastic and a much more significant place than realised. Right, returning to the book. Quote page 148. Proceeding around the corner, we come to a very tall stone cross. That's the one you can see there. This was decorated with, quotes, Celtic knotwork, and was clearly very old. And the quote from Alan Wilson, this cross was erected by Hugil Rex, the famous Hywel Dda, who died in 948. Alan continued, pointing out an inspection that gave his name. Since it was his king list that gave David as the cross's hiding place, the fact that Hywel Dda's own cross was here suggested, Alan and Barham believed, that the church was important. Okay, returning to the book. Moving to the front of the church, Alan pointed out another even more venerable stone, standing near to the entrance and carrying an inscription in runes as well as in Latin. This, Alan said, is a Vitaliani Emerito stone. We think he was the Uther Pendragon Gwythelyn, who is also known as Vortimer, the son of Vortigern. He is credited in the Kentish Chronicles of Nennius and other histories with driving the Saxon invaders Hengist and Horsa out of Kent around 456. Following his death, he is said to have been poisoned by his stepmother Ronwen, the daughter of Hengist. Vortigern was able to regain the throne, and the Saxons came back to England. That such an important stone as this was placed in Nevern again indicates the sanctity of the site. And here Adrian Gilbert leaves a sort of personal comment that I totally endorse, and I'm going to read it in full. Once more I was struck by the carelessness with which such ancient relics are treated. Why was such an ancient stone, one that carried inscriptions that were now barely legible, being left out in the frost and rain? It surely merited having at least a little shelter raised around it. Better still, it should be brought indoors, like the stones of Llantwit. It seemed that nobody in authority cared what happened to either it, or the cross of Hywel Dda. It would be left for future generations to weep that such carelessness in our time robbed them of so much of their heritage. Now, while here, I'm just going to make a short mention about this obsession with Brychan having come from Ireland, when he was in fact Welsh. He was born in Ireland, yes, but he's of parentage as Welsh on both sides. And if you look at the history, and this is referred to in the King Arthur Conspiracy by Wilson and Blackett, Brychan was the son of Marchel, the daughter of King Tudrig, which made him the first cousin of King Arthur II, ap Meirig ap Tudrig. And his father was Enlech Coronog, who was a king in Ireland, but he was the son of Hwdyn Dŵn, who was the son of Ceredig, who was the son of Cyneda Redig. And Ceredig had seized lands in Ireland and made himself a king there. So although he's born in Ireland, Brychan, not Brychni, as they say on some of the signs here, was British on both sides. And I'll do another video with more detail on that. I mean, we get round this strange idea that Brychan just sort of wandered into Wales and suddenly became the king of Brecon. And the British people just stepped aside and said, yeah, go on, but you have it. As opposed to the far more plausible story that he was granted this as part of his membership of the British royal family, because it was a royal kingdom and part of Wales. It also unravels this strange situation where he's credited with producing all this, bringing all this Christianity to South Wales, where the history of St. Patrick and going to Ireland, and actually the Welsh being Christian hundreds of years before Ireland were, and the cross conversion went the other direction, as is widely recorded. So he wouldn't have come to Wales and started preaching Christianity to a country that was already Christian. The mainstream story on this doesn't make any sense. Right, returning to the stone's description from Adrian Gilbert. Leaving the stone of Vortimer, we made our way inside the church and over to one of the windows. Here there was evidence of recycling, for one of the sills, which you'll see in a second, which bore the inscription Maglocfni Fili Clatori, was made out of what had been clearly started life as a memorial stone. It was this that Alan now wanted me to see. As you can see, the Latin inscription is repeated in Ogham letters, an ancient Irish alphabet, down the side. This reads Maglaconus Maci Glitter. Duplicating the inscriptions in Ogham is quite commonly done in this area, where there was a sizable Irish population. This stone has been remarked on by numerous scholars, including Professor McAllister, and though the grammar is not perfect, the consensus of opinion is that the Maglaconus in question is King Maelgwyn. Alan went on to explain that with this stone there is the usual problem of identification, as there were two important 6th century Maelgwyns. One was Maelgwyn of Llandaff, who was a brother of King Meirig and therefore King Arthur's uncle. The other was Maelgwyn of Gwynedd, or Maelgwyn the Troublesome, for whom it is believed it is more likely this stone was made. He was elected Dragon of the Island, which is the commander of the army of all Britons, in 580, following the death of King Arthur. He is called Maglo in Geoffrey of Monmouth's history, and is also recorded in the life of St. Cadoc. He was the son of Caswallon Lawhir, whose real name was Clutorius, or Cluto, as it says in the stone. Caswallon means ruler of the separated state or viceroy. Lawhir means long hand, implying a big man. This must have been a family trait, for Maelgwyn Gwynedd is said to have been the biggest man in Wales. He was also ruthless, for according to Gildas, he murdered his first wife, his uncle and his nephew, in order to marry the latter's young widow for himself. It was he who started a civil war in Wales that raged on and off for centuries and eventually led to the country's eclipse. The fact that the stone is in Dyfed and not in Gwynedd, where his home was kingdom in North Wales, again indicates the importance of Nevern historically. Thus 3 prominent kings all left stones in this church. First Vortimer at around 456, then Maelgwyn or Maglo, who was elected to rule Gwynedd, Powys and this area Dyfed in 580, And finally, Hywel Dda, who died in 948. Nevern itself is situated in Dyfed in West Wales. It's easy enough to find. And as often the case in Wales, there are so many clues in the old place names that still exist. The place Nevern could come from Never, which is holy or heavenly. It's situated on the River Nevern. In Welsh, Afon is river, Afon Nifer, which is the holy or heavenly river. Just a little bit down the river, this is run into by nothing more than a stream these days, but it's called the Afon Bannon, which is the river of the Empress. It's surrounded by place names dedicated to the Empress, and just further up the road you have Dinas Cross, which is the sort of the town or the city of the cross. Well, the whole area just reeks of information telling you this is where the cross went, or at least where the people believed, who wrote at the time, thought it had gone. This could be an international tourist resort, or place to go to, World Heritage, and what we have instead is this.
Okay, so here we are, Nevern. It's absolutely beautiful. Lots of places of interest, the church and the castle. Of course, we saw the cross, and there's the bleeding tree. And as usual, Wales tourism's gone crazy and really promoted it. And there's the campsite. My kind of camping, one tent in a damp field with no facilities, and a wooden sign. Oh, there's the wooden sign there. There you go. Do you see that now? That's it. There's the promotion. Ah, come on guys, let's pull our fingers out, isn't it? I mean, there's a real story here. Wales has got a unique history, and it should be out there and promoted, and it really is quite tragic.